Welcome back to Balance and Chaos with Kelley and Gretchen, except for Kelley is not here today because she is enjoying a vacation and has never been one who has enjoyed vacations and has now decided that maybe she can get used to the idea of a real vacation. So she will be back with us next week. So today we have a guest and we have our friend Alex. So Alex, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Hinrichs. I am a children's book author and librarian, and I'm happy to be here today.
So Alex is a super not a bookie like a gambling bookie, but a bookish nerd. And so we love her for that. So what is your education in? How did you get here?
My education is not in writing. I'll just get that out of the way first and foremost. I, as an undergraduate, majored in history and French. So I was reading a lot, just in French. And then for graduate school, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and got 2 masters, one in history, studying the history of childhood, and the other in library and information studies, where I concentrated on youth services. But that said, from a very young age, I always wanted to be a writer and said I wanted to be a writer. I honestly can't really explain why I said that and kind of knew that and never wavered in that. And in fact, I just found a letter that, as like part of a freshman leadership course, we had to write these letters to ourselves as freshmen that then we were given again as seniors. And in that letter, I said, I want to be a writer.
Was that when freshman in high school or?
In college.
In college.
And then I never. So, yeah, I took a roundabout route to getting here, but I don't feel like it was a detrimental route in any means. In some ways,
well, every route that you take gets you where you need to be, right?
Exactly.
So didn't you have like a really influential teacher though in high school or middle school?
Yes, I did. I had Susan Roney-O'Brien is a poet and retired teacher in Princeton, Massachusetts. And I had her in 6th grade, but in 5th grade, she kind of took me under her wing and started a young writers group. And so it was the best thing that ever happened to me, pretty much. It was a group of us, about 11 and up, I'd say, who were all interested in writing, and we focused on poetry. And we went to another poet, Julie Nunlist's house, and she had this really cool red barn studio. It was a red barn converted to a studio, and we met in there and felt like real poets. And in the feeling of it, became real poets and real writers. And I did that all through high school. And yes, so Mrs. O, as I called her, and have had a hard time stopping calling her, was a tremendous influence, and I feel so lucky to have had that teacher.
What were your favorite books as a child?
Oh boy. My favorite picture books were probably Amos and Boris by William Steig. Honestly, I don't know. I should really know how to pronounce it.
It's either Steig or Steig, right?
Yeah, it's one of those two. Amos and Boris. And also I might mess up the title. It's The Little Mouse, The Big Hungry Bear, and the Red Ripe Strawberry.
Oh, yeah.
You know that
yes,
one?
I know
Yeah.
that one.
Those were 2 of my favorite picture books. For middle grade novels, or what are now identified as middle grade novels, Anne of Green Gables was probably my all-time favorite. I read all 8 multiple times.
Have you been to PEI?
I haven't.
You haven't?
I haven't. I actually didn't have my passport when we moved here until really recently, like last month or 2 months ago.
Well, now that you have it,
It's
you
on
have
my
to
list,
go.
totally.
I have not been either. My parents honeymooned in PEI and then never went back with us. And so they've been back now as retirees. They're like, oh, we never took you here. I was like, no, you never did. And you always raved about it. And I hear wonderful things about it as a family vacation destination from other people with similar age kids. And it's really great. So it's on our list. It's on our list to go.
Well,
eventually.
That's interesting because I have been debating if and when I go whether I should take the kids or not. So you're making me think, okay, I really should. But I have 2 boys, and I just don't know. Maybe they'll fall in love with Anne
One
of
of my
Green
friends
Gables.
who loves it and went last year and is going again this year has 2 boys who are a little bit older than yours.
And did she do all the Anne of Green Gables stuff?
I don't know if she did the Anne of Green Gables stuff, but you can always do the Anne of Green Gables stuff, and they can go play in the red sand beaches or whatever. Like I think it's enough going on that it wouldn't be. It's not like it's Anne of Green Gables in the middle of a gravel pit where there's nothing else happening for a million miles around.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, and then I think for young adult, Madeline Langle's A Ring of Endless Light was my favorite, probably YA novel. So there, covered my bases.
So I'll give you mine. And picture books, I had one that was called The Bus to Chicago that I remember really liking, and it was just about this boy who takes the bus to Chicago. And it's not even a book that is known, or it's almost like one of those no author books. But I love that book about the bus to Chicago. And that's probably what started my love of cities and how cities work and all of that cool stuff. Then I would say Lois Lowry is a huge favorite.
Oh yeah.
Judy Blume. I follow them both on Twitter, and it's very exciting. And when I realized that Lois, see, you didn't grow up here. So I don't know if did you ever have Laurie and Associates lawyer ads?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's like it's like a personal injury lawyer ad.
Oh.
So there were these ads that ran all the time, and it was Laurie and Associates. And I only found out in the last, 5 or 10 years that was Lois Lowry's ex-husband, and she lived in Maine and lives in Maine, and she went to USM, and she had all these things, and I was like, you were so close this whole time. Did you know that?
I did not know that about the Associates and her ex-husband. I did know she's from Maine because this is like a big moment in my life, which tells you something about my level of where I am as an author. So I am one of the guest authors for Island Readers and Writers here in Maine, which is an awesome organization. And on the website, the authors are listed alphabetically, I think. And I'm next to Lois Lowry.
You're like, I'm right here.
I was this is the closest I will ever be to Lois Lowry, and it totally.
Well, someday Lois Lowry will say, "I can't believe I'm next to Alex Hinrichs," and it'll be wonderful.
I don't know about that, but
and so I loved. One of my favorites was A Summer to Die. I loved all the death in Lurlene McDaniel. Did you ever read?
Oh my gosh, that whole series, which I can't remember.
It's not even
Too
a
Young
series.
to Die or
Too
something.
Young to Die.
She has a bunch of series and a bunch of standalones, but there was one series with Dawn as the main character, and her best friend is Sandy, and Sandy dies, and Dawn does not. Sorry, spoiler alert, or too late for the spoiler alert.
There was a spoiler back there,
but I was obsessed with those in middle school, and I think I reread them in high school too. But
I think I should look for research on this, but it has to be a developmental thing, because when I taught in middle school, there was this point where everyone hit the Lurlene McDaniel stage. Like, I just want to read about people dying. And so it must be like a way that tweens process death. Actually, my own daughter has said, okay, I like books that are about real kids and real stories, but nothing bad happens. And I'm like, well, those books don't exist, because the whole point of a book is that there's a conflict. And so I just got her one at the book fair that actually has somebody die in it on purpose. Like, you have to understand death. And she's reading it and she's enjoying it. I'm like, is it too scary? No, it's pretty good. So I think she's right on the cusp of her Lurlene McDaniel years.
all right.
And Judy Blume She has my copy of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, from when I was in 5th grade, and she read it when she was in 5th grade, and my name is written on the inside in like 14 color of pen and like 5th grade writing, and it's the original. You know that they have adapted Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Yes, to make it more up to date with like
the pads.
Yeah.
There's no longer where you know they no longer have to ask their mother what's a belt, which I get. Like, okay, sure, it was 100 years ago, but are we going to put Laura Ingalls Wilder in a car? No. I think there's so I keep my classic Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, so that my children can understand the history of feminine protection.
But I think that also tells you something about, I mean, that book still serves that purpose, you know? Yeah. And
there's a Gretchen in it.
And well, yeah, I mean, we have to keep it around.
Oh, and that's the other one that I loved as a kid. Gretchen Hits the Ball. Because it was the only book that had my name in it. And I never owned it. We always got it from the library. And when I got older, I actually have a collection now of children's picture books with Gretchen in the title.
Oh, good. You found more.
Yes, and that one. So I own Gretchen Hits the Ball.
Nice.
Which is ironic because if you've listened, you know I had Special Jim and never wanted to be near the ball. But was not a prophetic story, but it had my name in it.
That's important. Does Ingrid have books? I'm trying to think of Ingrid's books with Ingrid.
Not really. If she looks, she actually saw one, and we were at the library yesterday. And she goes, and she pulled out the shelf. She goes, "Look, read the back." But it was like a sci-fi book with a character named Ingrid, and I was like, "Oh, look at that!" But there aren't many. There are Willa is. There's like a series called something Willa, like Willa Bean, and it's sort of but it's like one of those kind of crappy series that feels like it was written by, it's not well written, but it has Willa in the title, so she likes it.
Well, and someday she'll get to read is it Willa Cather?
Yes.
Oh, I love her.
So you pause on the pronunciation on Steig or whatever, and one of the best quotes I read was, somebody who mispronounces words is just telling you that they're a reader, because they've seen the words, they know the words, but then all of a sudden they're like, ooh, I don't know how to pronounce that word. So I always think whenever the girls mispronounce a word, see, that just means you've read it somewhere. You know what it means. You just never heard it said out loud.
I do that still, where I've read a word so many times and then I'll go to say it out loud and I totally say it wrong. And it happened recently with my partner, but I won't out him on what it was. But needless to say, there was a lot of laughter in that moment.
Well, it was him saying the word?
It was, which made me actually feel better because he tends to know everything about everything. And I'm the one making those blunders, so It was satisfying. Sorry, honey.
So there's the Lurlene McDaniel years, and then I'm trying to think of what I read in high school. And that was a long time ago for me because...
Well, I think the market has really changed. And I think saying market is also key to it, because not necessarily the story, some of the stories themselves have changed, but young adult literature as a thing, like I don't remember having YA books as a section. I remember seeking out books with people my own age, but not always successfully, and not always. I feel like I read a lot of adult literature too, and some books like The Book Thief.
Mm-hmm.
So that Marcus Zusak is Australian, I believe, and that was first published in Australia as an adult book, but then it was repackaged here as a young adult book. So anyway, I do think it does kind of just depend on what. Yeah, I'm on a tangent now, but.
Well, I think I love reading the YA books and reading the middle grade books, because if it's a good story, it's a good story, and I don't tend to get too wrapped up in the category, except for like there are some genres that I just don't enjoy, or I don't read westerns, I don't read sci-fi, fantasy stuff. I like contemporary fiction and maybe historical fiction, stuff like that.
I don't think I've ever read a western. I do read some sci-fi and a fair amount of fantasy, but The other thing, too, about young adult literature in middle grade, I feel like some of the most exciting writing out there is happening in those genres. And I think that there's that kind of goes in line with the fact that there are young adults leading changes happening in the world right now, and there's also those kinds of themes.
Well, have you seen the tweet? Like I've seen a tweet go around that says basically, we've been feeding them dystopian fiction and youth rebellion stories for a decade. We haven't been just giving them books, we've been training them. Something like that. That's incredibly paraphrased, and I'll try to find it. But basically, what do you expect? We've told them that they can rise up and take over.
Yeah, I think I saw, I don't know if it's the exact tweet or a similar one that was like, the Hunger Games, children go to the Capitol to protest kids dying. Mm-hmm. 2018, children going to the Capitol to protest children dying. And it's like, oof, yeah.
Definitely. So how did you end up becoming an author?
My first job was working at American Girl as a historical researcher when I was in graduate school. So I was working there part-time. I didn't know that they were headquartered right near Madison, Wisconsin. They're in Middleton, Wisconsin. And when I found out, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to apply. I will sweep the floors. I don't care what I do.
Were you into American Girl dolls when you were a kid?
I was. I did have a couple of the dolls, and I read those books nonstop. And I always loved historical fiction, and those were the first historical fiction books I really read. Ironically, I could not stand history classes until pretty late in high school. I say ironically since it went on to be my major and then my graduate degree. But so anyway, I got this job as a historical researcher, and it was a dream job. Honestly, it was really fun. I loved the people I worked with and working on the books, and I left it to move here after 3 years. We were moving here for a job opportunity for my partner, and I thought, well, okay, now I can focus on my writing and try and write for myself. But I was also in the right place at the right time because an editor at the Getty Museum contacted my supervisor at American Girl and asked for some ideas about authors to turn to because they were interested in doing a historical picture book. And he included my name and said, she's not published yet, but she's a great writer and you might want to give her a chance. And so she contacted me then and asked for a writing sample and then an outline for a possible story, and that turned into my first book, which came out in 2016 and is called Thérèse Makes a Tapestry, about a girl in 17th century Paris who wants to weave for the king at a time when girls were not allowed to weave. So that was a very kind of lucky start in that I had a book commissioned for me, even though I didn't have that writing background, or the published writing, but I had the work experience, and I did have the writing ability and was able to fortunately show the editor that and then work from there. But now I'm kind of backpedaling because there are so many things, or at least the last couple of years I've been stepping back. I joined the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators and have gone to those conferences and other workshops and learned more about the community, and I've always read children's. I never stopped reading picture books or middle grade or YA. So I've always been kind of up on the literature in that sense. But just making contacts, learning the community, learning more about the craft. And, it's one of those things, the more you learn, the more you realize you have to learn kind of thing too. So yeah, it's been I can't think of a better community to be a part of professionally. They're children's book authors, I think, are pretty upbeat, optimistic, fun people. And so I'm really, really fortunate and so glad to have become a part of that community too.
Awesome. When you were at American Girl, so you said you were a historical researcher. So what exactly does that mean?
So usually I describe that kind of as being a historical editor. I would work on a manuscript from its outline form through to the finished book pretty much. And I would do primarily two things. One was provide research to an author, and then also fact check the story as it came in. So I would be literally reading line by line, and it depended on the story, which ranged from, my projects ranged from the early 1800s through the 1970s.
Did you focus on like a certain character, or was it all?
No. Well, so I worked on mostly mysteries, and I was the lead researcher on several different mysteries. And the characters I worked on Rebecca. I worked on Julie, Kit, Marie Grace, who is archived now. She was the 1850s New Orleans, and her friend Cecile. So those were the characters. I might be missing some, but I think I worked on Samantha too. But anyway, so yeah, I was reading broadly and for minute details. Like you might need to know did shoelaces exist, or were pockets in clothing or tied on?
No, they weren't, because they've never been in clothing, and they will never be in clothing because the world hates pockets on girls' clothes. So that's an easy one. Just say, no, she didn't put that in her pocket because she's a girl and there were no pockets.
I wonder how many times you've managed to bring up pockets on this podcast.
More pockets.
Are you listening, clothing manufacturers? I'm currently wearing a pocketless dress. And
of course you are.
It is frustrating.
Yes, totally. I'm wearing a pocketless skirt. That's why I'm wearing a coat. So I have pockets.
Exactly. I have a coat on too.
Yep.
What were we talking about?
About your research at American Girl.
Yeah. So, for one mystery, I was learning all about African gray parrots. For another, about Houdini. It was really fun and kind of wild.
Is there any most interesting fact that you learned by doing all this research?
Oh gosh, the most interesting fact. I don't know if I could narrow it down to one. I did learn a lot about in that African gray parrot project. I didn't realize how smart birds are. I'm sorry, birds of the world.
They're like, yeah, we're smart. We can hear this. We know.
And it gave new meaning to the phrase bird brain, which I did put in that looking back. I also, one thing I was completely fascinated by, I did some research on polio and the development of the vaccine. And I had no idea how controversial that development was of that particular vaccine, because it was a live It was a live vaccine, and that was a really interesting history to learn about. And there were, multiple people competing to finish it simultaneously. So I did like that.
Was it like the space race only for polio vaccines?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because it was like that same Cold War era.
Right.
So that competition was kind of paralleled that.
When you wrote your book, I remember you got to go to LA, right?
I did.
So tell us about that.
I went to Los Angeles for the opening of the tapestry exhibit that my book came out in relation to. So this is at the Getty Museum. And the tapestry exhibit was of tapestries primarily from the 17th and early 18th centuries, French tapestries or tapestries that were part of Louis XIV's collection. And it was so much fun. It was really moving too, in a way that I didn't quite expect, because I'd been working on this book and we used a real tapestry as the basis for the one that Thérèse weaves. And I had been looking at it on computer screens and in books, and the size, the biggest size I ever saw was maybe like 2 inches by 4 inches.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not good at math or scale, but it was very small. Is really what I'm trying to convey. Maybe a little bit bigger than 2 by 4, but certainly very small. And when we walked in to one of the rooms at one point, it was there on the wall in real life. And I was standing with the illustrator, Renee Grafe, and our editor, Elizabeth Nicholson, and the curator, who also did a lot of research and answered so many questions for us, Charissa Bremer David. And we were all standing there, and we walked in. Charissa had seen it, but I think, yeah, she must have. But it was just, it literally took my breath away. I think it did for all of us, because there it was. And it's huge. It is floor to ceiling, but not like a normal house.
Right. Like gallery floor to ceiling.
Yeah, gallery floor to ceiling, and then wall to wall. I mean, it was enormous.
So it's different than the tapestries you would hang on your dorm room wall in the early 90s.
Did you hang tapestries on your walls in the early 90s, Gretchen?
Of course. Did you have those back when you went to college?
No, we moved on to posters.
Oh, well, no, they're posters too. But there would always be a poster sale and a tapestry sale, and you had to buy like the most hippie looking tapestry, and then you stapled it to your wall, and that was your like wallpaper.
I think I might have had a
clearly I should have gone to France and gotten a good one.
Yes, you really should have. Well, in the Blume, where the story takes place, is still a working tapestry manufacturer.
So was the tapestry that is hanging in the Getty, is it had it been woven by a girl?
No. So that's the fictional part of my historical fictional.
She probably would have done it if she'd had pockets.
I don't know that pockets would necessarily have
keep all
changed.
her stuff in her little needle.
Maybe pockets changed rules for girls,
or she was weaving a pocket.
Gretchen really likes
getting
this
the real work
idea.
done.
So girls until the 19th century were not allowed to weave at the Blume manufactory. Boys were trained from about age 11 on, but girls were there at the factory. I say factory, it's not like a factory like you would picture today, but it was a manufactory or workshop, artisan workshop. And
so not like the Lowell textile mills that little kids worked at here.
No. And the weavers and other artists, they lived on site with their families. So there were kids present that was part of my inspiration for the book, was looking at the Encyclopedia of Arts and Sciences that Diderot wrote. And he has so many illustrations in that. And one is of the Gobelin, or more than one, but there's one where you see a picture of the workshop and there's a little girl standing in front and she's carrying a skein of yarn for one of the weavers. And so I knew that there were girls on site and that they were actively present in the workshop. So I took it from there and thought about, well, what if there was a girl who wanted to weave? And then we explored whether girls might have been able to weave elsewhere. So we determined that they could have been weaving in their house. So in Therese's story, she has a small loom in her house that she uses to make like napkins and blankets, like practical household items. And she practices on that. And that's how she weaves. So she's not weaving the big tapestry. She's weaving something small that's a gift for her father, actually. And it goes from there. But
so when they approached you to do this book, how much did they give you? Did they say we want it to be about this tapestry and a girl weaves it, or what was the pitch to you?
They said they wanted a story about French tapestries from the 17th, 18th centuries. And that was kind of it. And my research quickly led me to the Gobelin, to that picture, to identifying that girl and thinking about girls in the workshop. And a lot of it I felt like there was just a lot of synchronicity involved. And when I did talk to my editor, and we went back and forth on outlines in a couple different versions, but it always seemed like we were in sync with what we were thinking about and imagining. And she loved the idea of having it be about a girl, and the possibilities that explored in history.
What were you writing specifically about that tapestry that was going to hang in the Getty, or was that just something that happened?
That was, we did look for a tapestry that would be part of the exhibit. And that tapestry, which is called the Month of December, had not been out in public on display for something like half a century. I think it'd been in storage. I would have to double check this. So sorry if this is wrong.
You're fact checking.
I would need to fact check my fact checks. But I believe it had been in storage since around World War II.
Yeah.
Like it'd been a long time.
So
they restored it for this exhibit.
What was the most surprising thing about writing a book and going through this process?
To some extent, I didn't have perhaps some of the surprises that other debut authors might have, because I'd worked at American Girl first and had been on the publishing end of things. I had seen how closely authors and illustrators were working with editors and art designers, and how much of a collaboration it was. So I think that sometimes is a surprise of just that there's so much teamwork that goes into it, and that it's not just, here's my manuscript. But for me, one of the actual surprises was to do with the illustrations, and it was a really happy surprise. And it was twofold. One was, part of it was that my editor had asked me if I had any illustrators in mind, and I did. I had one, but I thought, I am a debut author. I and I'm dealing with the Getty, who knows art better than anyone. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. and whoever they get is going to be wonderful, and I'm going to be happy. So I didn't even suggest the one person I had in mind. And then when I found out who the illustrator was, it was the person I had in mind.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was Renee Grafe. And so that was a really fun surprise. And then the other part of it, you know, when you're writing a story with, I mean, I think most stories have characters in some form, but maybe some stories aren't as character driven as others. And you have an idea of what your character looks like and how they manifest in the world. And I was preparing myself, okay, this is not going to be how my character looks. So I got the initial sketches of Therese, and I gave myself like a little prep. Like, okay, it's not going to be what you're imagining, so let it go and then get on board kind of thing. And and this is even knowing it was an illustrator I loved. You know, you just have an idea and you know it can't.
It almost sounds like parenting advice.
Yeah, that's true. I should adopt that, my own advice given back to me by Gretchen. Thank you. Repackaged. So anyway, I opened those initial images and it was my character looking at me. Like, I recognized her instantly and like teared up on the spot because it was her, and it was not something I ever could have imagined, that sensation of recognizing my own character.
I know you're writing now and you try to carve out time for your own writing. What are some ways that you make sure to write? What are some tips or tricks or whatever for writing?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to give advice, first of all. But I write in mostly pockets of time, which is hard, both in the sense of, you know, you're not able to dive into something for hours on end the way you might want to, and just identifying them and grabbing them, as opposed to, you know, you could use the same amount of time to fold laundry, which I'm sure there are days my partner wishes I did. But I think giving yourself permission to use pockets of time, regardless of how small they are, to do your work, your writing, is one of the hardest and best things you can do for yourself. And safeguarding them too. Now, Fridays are my writing days, and so I have a little more time. But honestly, I don't necessarily get all that more writing done, because then there's also submissions and querying and it all just, and then there are certain errands that I'm like, okay, really, I do need to use part of my Friday to go do this. So I'm still working on that safeguarding, but having a place too is really, I converted what the former owners of our house were using as a storage closet, but is big enough to be like a little studio, and there wasn't heat, but there was a vent in the guest room right next to it that we could tap off of and add heat. And so we did that after a couple of years, and found, you know, some bookshelves at a store that was closing, and a desk, you know, that secondhand, and I turned it into a studio that's now my favorite room in my house. And when I walk into that space, I do feel like my mind shifts, and
You're going to work.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm going to work. And so it is nice to have a place. But I don't think you necessarily have to. I think the most important thing, which you'll hear time and again as a writer, is button chair, which and I did an amazing workshop / retreat at Jane Yolen's house, and that was her big thing, is button chair Bic.
And Jane Yolen is a prolific children's author, and you got to go to her house. And of course, I joke about this, but when you were there, I thought you texted me and you ran into somebody whose mother I knew, who was actually from here, which was crazy. It was the daughter of the woman that I did one of my student teaching experiences with like 13 years ago.
Her debut book comes out tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow?
It's tomorrow. Her name is Casey Robinson. Her book is Ivor and Ellsworth, about a rooftop bear.
It's about the polar seltzer bear.
Yeah, I know.
Which is my favorite. And I actually had seen...
Inspired by.
Whatever. I saw that bear when I went to Washington, D.C. on the Girl Scout bus, because I don't usually drive through that part of Massachusetts. And I was like, oh, I love you, polar seltzer. And I had seen, and I knew that she had a book coming out, but I had never made the connection until... Was it on Facebook or something? I was like, oh, inspired by the polar. And I was like, the polar seltzer bear. This is going to be a book I'm going to have to own because I love polar seltzer.
Yeah, I think I posted that.
Yes. Anyway, inspired by.
Yeah, it's
true
such
events.
a sweet story. I can't wait. I pre-ordered mine from the Briar Patch downtown. And Casey is one of my dear friends now and a writing critique partner. So the two... And she and another author whose debut is coming out next year, Jamie Denahan, the three of us all met at Jane Yolen's house, and we had an awesome group. And the three of us are all kind of in around the same place in our careers. And
so how do you end up at Jane Yolen's house?
On a dream. No, I mean she did picture book boot camp a couple of times. I mean, more than a couple. I'm sorry. She did it a couple of times that year. And the requirement is that you are published or contracted to be published. And you can apply, and Heidi Stempel, her daughter, is also there, and she cooked every single meal for us. It was phenomenal. And we went owling with her, and Heidi is the little girl in Owl Moon.
Oh, cool.
So that was really, really fun. But yeah, so then she ran this wonderful series of workshops, and we stayed in her house, and it was a wonderful experience. I just have the fondest memories of it.
So if somebody's listening and say, well, I want to be a picture book writer, what would you tell them to pick up? What are the tools that they need that they could do without they don't have the credentials to go hang out with Jane Yolen yet? So what are the things that they could pick up, buy? They need to get their butt in the chair, but what are some things to have?
I think one of the best things you can do for yourself as an aspiring picture book author is or pre-published, as they say, if you're writing, but aren't yet out there, right? You're doing the work, so you're already a writer. You don't, and anyway, is to join Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI, and then go to the conferences, because they have such great workshops. And that's actually where I met Jane Yolen first, was at SCBWI, because she's always there, and the New England one, I should say, the New England branch of it. And take advantage of all the resources that are out there. The other group for picture books that's really amazing and a wealth of resources and information and support is called 12 by 12. The 12 by 12 picture book challenge, that's run by Julie Headland. And that is both an online forum, and there's a Facebook group that goes along with it. And there are webinars run by agents and editors and authors, and just all kinds of, I participate in a craft book discussion group that's really neat and helpful. But they just have lots of support, lots of people cheering each other on, and are an easy place to just learn and get critiques, get all that stuff you need when you're first starting out. And then, also just do the writing. The best thing you can do it is both write and read. Read. Right. Take out books. Sometimes I have actually gone to the library with a suitcase and checked out that many picture books. And occasionally, my passenger, I'll put them on my passenger seat in my car, and then my car will beep at me that there is someone unbuckled in my car.
Those books.
So read, and write, because the best thing you can do for yourself is also write, and writing down. Don't worry about the bad ideas or if it's a bad idea, because sometimes the bad ideas turn into good ideas. I keep a running list of ideas. I just use my phone, the note app on my phone, because I always have my phone on me. So that way, whereas like a little notebook, which I would really like to be one of those like artsy cool people that has a little notebook they whip out of a pocket.
A moleskin. Yeah, but you're a woman and you don't have pockets.
I can't depend on the pocket or a purse or whatever. But the reality is,
this is why a pocket for corduroy was such a success. Saw a need.
Oh, that's another one of my favorites. I think those things, and the other group I love is Tara Lazar, who's another picture book author, runs Story Storm every January, and that's open to anyone, and it's a series of blog posts and just kind of inspirational or shop talk posts from a variety of people in the field. And the idea is you generate one idea every day and you write it down, and that's open to anyone. You don't have to, and it's free, and it's a really great thing to keep in your pocket. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I do that in January, and then I have a running list that I use the rest of the year, and I still add to it throughout the year. I don't do it every day anymore, but I am pretty good about doing it in January. And I do actively use that list of stories, because I can't always think on the spot when I'm ready to write a new draft of exactly what I want that to be about.
So you have kids. What are some of your favorite picture books that are more contemporary since you were a kid that your kids enjoy or that you enjoy?
There's so many out there right now. A go-to picture book I love to give as baby gifts is All the World by Liz Garten Scanlon, and that's illustrated by Marla Frazee.
The one that I always give is Everywhere Babies, which is, I'm blanking on the author's name, but I think that's also illustrated by Marla Frazee.
Exactly. There's truly so many out there. For funny books, one of my favorites right now is The Legend of Rock, Paper, Scissors, which has me in stitches every time I read it. That it's a hoot. And there's a book I just read today that is lyrical, and it's called What If, I think. Oh gosh, I hope that's what it's called. And that's by Samantha Berger and illustrated by Mike Curato. Again, I might be mispronouncing these names. But it's essentially about what if your forms of storytelling were taken away from you. So if the way you told stories just were eliminated, what would you do? And it's just a beautiful story about, well, you would find another way. You're always going to create. You're always going to tell a story. I love that book. I'm stumbling here because my mind is reeling with the possibilities. I'm trying to think of books my boys, well, they both love The Legend of Rock, Paper, Scissors. There is, Jane Yolen's new book, A Bear Sat on My Porch Today, is really, really fun. It's a cumulative tale about all these different animals who come and sit on the porch. And there's some grumpy moments and some happy moments and some funny moments and an awesome double gate fold where all the 2 pages open up, and I really enjoy that.
I would say that like in ours, and my girls are sort of aging out of aging out of picture books.
Never.
Even though you never age out of picture books. But Chris Van Dusen is like an absolute favorite. And and I give his books as gifts all the time. And I'm like, yes, I'm like, this is not a Maine author. This is an author that happens to be from Maine. Because sometimes, I'll give a local book and sometimes it's kind of like, it's not that great. But his are so engaging. And he actually came and spoke at an event that we saw. And he did this whole workshop and showed us how he brought in the some of the original paintings and stuff that he had done for his books, because he's an author and an illustrator. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing, and he's absolutely one of our favorites.
Yes, the circus ship is one of our go-tos.
Yep.
Maine is pretty rich in authors and illustrators.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm distracted by your cat.
So, any favorite things? So let's wrap it up with some favorite things, or anything to add before we move on to favorite things.
I just feel like I need to say I feel like I'm leaving out so many books and that I'm missing an opportunity to say them all, and I apologize for that.
Well, when you take books by the suitcase, of course you're going to leave out some. If we put in all your favorite books, all the podcast would just be you reading titles, right?
Right.
So what's your favorite thing?
Well, related to children's books, another podcast. So I have pretty much like 2 podcasts I listen to every single week. Balance and Chaos is one of those. The other one is the Children's Book Podcast by Matthew Winner. And he interviews authors, illustrators, sometimes agents or editors, and he's a very upbeat person, and I always come away from listening to it always feeling like I learned something, but also just happy. It's like, I know if I listen to the Children's Book Podcast, I will come away happy. Sometimes I do cry listening to your podcast. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh, we got some heavy topics, though.
You do.
Like, it's not a daily thing, right? Like, it's not a weekly thing.
No,
like,
I don't cry every week, I promise.
Okay, we have some coming up that might make you cry, because we have some great guests lined up. But we try to hit all those different things. You know what I mean?
It's all about balance.
My favorite thing going along with books is I love Goodreads.
Oh, yeah.
Do you use Goodreads to
I do.
keep track of stuff?
I use it because I am a forgetful person too, and I will sometimes look at a book and start reading it and then realize 2 chapters and I've read it before. And so I do use it now to keep track of my books. I have to say, I wish it would like keep track of books that I've made. Well, I could just make a list of books that I've given as gifts, because I've also been known to re-gift a book to the same person. I'm like, this person needs to read this book. I need to give it to them. And then I give it to them multiple times.
Well, it depends on what the book is, I guess. If you keep on giving, like, lose this toxic habit. I love Goodreads for that forgetful thing where I hear about a good book or I read a review of a good book and I think, oh, that sounds like one I'd really like. And I just throw the title into my Goodreads, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, I would like to read a book. And I can go through and look and say, oh, right, I remember reading this review 2 years ago, and now it's time to do it. The other thing I love about it is, are you signed up for Goodreads deals?
No.
So in Goodreads Deals, it looks at your list of what you want to read. It profiles you based on the books you've already read and the ones you've rated and things. And it will send you update. Every day there's a Goodreads Deals update of, we think you might like these deals. And we happen to notice that the Kindle version of this, in particular, because I use a Kindle almost exclusively, this book is down to $1.99. This book is down to... So I get all these great books when they're on sale for a day. And so then I'll buy them even though I'm not ready to read them yet, but I'll say, oh yeah, I did want to read that book. Boom, $2. And it's in my Kindle library so that then when I finish whatever book I'm on, I'm looking for something to read, I can look in my library and say, oh yeah, I want to read this book now.
I don't really use Kindle. I use mostly I read, real books, I guess, for lack
paper
of
books.
A better...
Papers, yeah. a good idea.
Books made out of paper. That I buy from my local bookstore, which is also one of my favorite things. The Briar Patch.
I love the Briar Patch, and I just spent a bunch of money with them last week. They had an event, and I bought some books for my daughter, and I bought a book for my classroom and my teaching and stuff like that.
Speaking of awesome Maine authors, I think, it'll be before. Lynn Plord is going there tomorrow.
Yes.
But I also use Cloud Library, which lets me check out ebooks and audiobooks from the library.
Yeah.
And a lot of libraries, some libraries will use Overdrive, but I feel like most libraries now have,
in Maine they've all switched to the Cloud Library.
Well,
I miss Overdrive.
I have mixed feelings. I use Cloud Library a lot, and I'm on board with it now, but there are certain features of Overdrive that I miss. I feel like the searchability was a little easier, but
the main reason I miss Overdrive is that you can't get Cloud Library on a Kindle, and I don't like reading on a device because it's far too distracting. So people make fun of me for having all these devices, but my Kindle allows me to still get lost in a book, but it doesn't take up space. I don't have lots of bookshelf space. I can read in the dark because it's the Paperwhite, so it has the backlight. And it used to be that when we had Overdrive, I could check out the books and put my Kindle in airplane mode. And then when the book expired, it went back on the shelf at the library, on the online library, but it stayed on my Kindle until I reconnected to the internet and it wiped it off. So I would be able to take the time I needed to read the book if I had to. And I miss all of those features, which don't exist with the Cloud Library.
Yeah, I think that Amazon won't they won't contract with Cloud Library. They only will work with Overdrive. So come on, Amazon. Support libraries all around.
Actually, I've read it the other way too, that it's I've read it in both directions, but Amazon's a big company and it was certainly nice to have the Overdrive feature. But anyway. Yeah,
totally. I agree.
So next week we're going to have Kelley on, but Alex, thank you for joining us today. You're about to go, you're going to leave before Kelley gets back because you're going on a big trip.
I am.
And I hope that you have a wonderful time. And I'm not going on any trips I'm going to a conference in July, but then not till November. So if you enjoyed listening to Balance and Chaos, please tell 2 friends. You can always leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And if you have any questions or want to join us on Facebook, you can find us at Balancing Chaos Podcast on Facebook as well. And hope you have a great week. Thank you again, Alex.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.